Right, so benefits bashing is back in vogue again, but the fact of the matter is we all get sick, and this could affect any one of us in future. Half of us get cancer in our lifetimes. We could be hit by a bus tomorrow. If we survive, where would it leave us, and where is the social security safety net to help us when we need it? Would you vote it away just because you're healthy now, or are you rich enough it wouldn't affect you? Rishi Sunak seems to get a certain satisfaction out of punching downwards. Small man syndrome, perhaps. But it's been the Tory way for the last 14 years, as we know. The very much legitimate numbers of long-term sick and disabled people bear that out. Demonised and called shirkers instead of workers. But not only have the Tories attacked those who were already suffering with additional health complications in their lives, the Tories set about making even more of them. Austerity and ensuring everyone struggled to get by more by reducing all of our spending power and reducing all of our ability, certainly amongst the working class, but latterly with even middle class families becoming affected, making life that bit harder, that much more of a struggle. Then came the pandemic, epically mismanaged by the Tories, creating a great many more sick people amongst those who survived it. So now Rishi Sunak is thinking we need to demonise the sick again and effectively take steps to destroy social security itself by putting a time limit on it. And he wonders why he can't turn things around in the polls. Right, so Rishi Sunak's speech to the Centre for Justice think tank on his plans for welfare reform are utterly insane. Puts into the shade any welfare reforms we've seen so far from the Tories, purely on the basis that he thinks too many people are sick and that can't possibly be right. That thinking, I suppose, hasn't really changed, but the levels and limits he's going to now definitely seem to be a further lurch to the right. And having seen how Tory assessments performed by non-medical staff have worked so well in getting people booted off the support they need previously, he's now intent on going even further with that by taking the ability to issue sick notes out of the hands of GPs, presumably because these people know too much. That was always my conclusion when they took the ability to deem who was really sick and who wasn't out of the hands of doctors from a benefits perspective. Handing the signing of sick notes over to a new equivalent to disability assessors will have the same effect. Misdiagnoses, a removal of support that people need, people becoming more desperate, and it being missed when people turn out to be so seriously ill, yet being put in a position where they are instead forced to work, that they end up in a far worse condition, or indeed dead. It's no exaggeration to say that either. We've seen it too often already in the cases of people who have been long-term sick or disabled, who have had their support erroneously removed with fatal consequences. The Tories are so sure that bashing such people is a vote winner because Cameron and Osborne successfully pulled this stunt before. But it won't work now, not when so much of their failure and the failures of their policies have been documented and exposed and continues to be by media outlets that actually specialise in it now, such as Disability News Service. Sunak talked of it not being fair on taxpayers. Thatcherite, meaningless talk. Taxes pay for nothing. Public spending does, with tax offsets to avoid inflation rises. But it's not fair on them that they have to pay for people who could work but choose not to. In Hugh's view, doctors sign them off. I dare say they know more than you do, Rishi. It's dangerous, inflammatory talk, and it's ignorant as sin, because the government is effectively saying we know best. Sunak is saying he knows best. Yet when he talks of taxpayers' money, for many people these days, looking at him, the wealthiest PM we've ever had, a man who has no clue whatsoever what it is like to struggle in the slightest, and never as a man who, lest I remind you, couldn't work out how to pay with a contactless card at a petrol station, made less of an impact on the country over such matters, and one whopping great elephant in the room on that score has been where he has blown vast sums of taxpayers' cash. How about eat out to help out, or help the virus out, as Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty put it? A super spreader event during the pandemic. How about all those contracts his own family are connected to? Government contracts. All those oil and gas licenses in the North Sea, for example. BP being a notable feature in them, who have an IT contract with his wife's family firm Infosys. Well, how did that happen? What about the NHS IT system? Oh, that's Infosys too, isn't it? According to the London Economic, Infosys have received £66 million in government contracts, or as Sunak puts it, taxpayers' money, since 2015. Of that, £47 million has been since 2020, which just happens to be when Sunak became Chancellor of the Exchequer and was put in charge of the nation's purse strings. He is literally the last man on earth who is in a position to preach to people in this country about responsible government spending. Being sick isn't a choice. It can happen to any of us at any time. Life is like that. I'll use my own parents as an example. I'm sure other people have similar stories they can relate to. I lost my father at the age of 57 to cancer. 1 in 2 of us face getting cancer at some point in our lives. How bad would it be if Sunak gets his way here, and instead of getting the time for both the treatment and the recovery, which of course are essential, you are instead being hounded the whole time to find work that you're able to do, even potentially up to the day you die, because some job's worth on a role where there will be no doubt targets, because the whole exercise is about reducing the benefit bill, is what we've seen before for ESA assessments and PIP assessments after all. Well, my mother went from walking her dog 7 miles a week at the age of 70 last year to developing motor neuron disease, not only meaning she cannot walk, but cannot even feed herself anymore. Can happen to any of us. What work can she possibly do then? Perhaps these are extreme examples. But the point I'm making is if a non-medical professional will now be deciding who can work and who can't, where is the differentiation going to be? Where's the line going to be drawn when there's targets set to get the bill down, as Sunak wants inevitably, means some people will be thrown off their support even if they need it? Because that's what has happened before, and we'll see it all happen again. Where compassion and understanding is needed, where genuinely fixing this country and putting policies into force to do that, Sunak instead talks of an ambition in people's potential for work. Again, the work capability assessment is apparently going to become even more restrictive than it already is. That assessment has been a death sentence for thousands already. How many more have to die? Only those with less severe conditions, we're told, will be expected to engage in the world of work, he says. But if their conditions have already been judged to be legitimate, with all the medical evidence that people now know to include, with work capability assessments already being overturned at tribunal more times than they ever get upheld, all this is going to do is put more stress on already sick people, making them even more ill for longer, and in all likelihood see even more of these assessments overturned. Instead of recognising the appalling lethal failure of these assessments, a stick proven to not work when you beat people with it, Sunak's policy is to just get a bigger stick. A sick note culture, he's calling it. Well, there's no such thing and never has been. What it is a response to 14 years of crushing Tory misrule. Our NHS is in such a dire state that waiting lists are at an all-time record high, meaning people waiting for operations or procedures are waiting longer than ever, unable to work. Are you just going to go around and start asking them what work they can do whilst they're waiting now? There are other factors too. Poverty is rife, making more people ill. Unable to access regular proper food, regular meals, queues at food banks growing ever larger. These people disproportionately more likely then to become ill themselves. Wages stagnating means this is a growing problem. Benefit uprating is already inadequate following years of Tory freezes in the name of austerity. NHS services are failing, especially when it comes to mental health. And Sunak was particularly focused on people signed off with depression and anxiety, as if these aren't real problems. My God, if you want to really drive people to the very end, pick on those suffering mental health crises, why don't you? Instead of presenting a plan to address these societal shortcomings, Sunak, in his inept cluelessness, thinks punishing people will win him votes, and that's all this is about. Living proof, if ever there was some, that electing stupidly wealthy people to preside over a country that is majority working class fails every time. Is it not time we stopped electing ennobled rich fops who went to the right schools with the right people, because they're not the right people for this role? Instead of investing in the services we all need to help more people get back to work when healthy again, Sunak would rather invest in more people carrying more sticks. A very sick society is one that would vote for. Whilst I'm on the subject of those assessors, though, where is Sunak going to get them from to write these sick notes, or not, as the case may be, when they don't have enough assessors to do the assessment jobs they already have? Retention amongst these assessors is awful. Frankly, how much damage to their mental health does it do to inflict such misery on others to meet targets? PIP assessments, for example, and I know this because my wife is waiting for her next one, they're currently 48 weeks behind, nearly a year. This just won't work. But so far, of course, I've only talked about those out of work, mainly because Sunak only talked about those out of work himself. But that misses all the people in work who need benefits to keep going, and all of those who can't work more even if they need to under this regime. 40% of universal credit claimants are in work. Sunak says work more or you're on the clock for when I will take away all of your benefits. But what if they can't? What if additional work isn't possible in their area? No jobs, or perhaps they have caring responsibilities. In some jobs they already work above and beyond normal hours for no extra pay, so square that hole, especially when these people are at more risk of being burnt out than anyone else, working too many hours. Turnover amongst teachers and teaching staff and those in health sector roles are particularly notable here, particularly vulnerable to this. No hope for getting signed off when it gets too much. You'll just end up losing these people completely as they choose to put their own health first. And another thing, Sunak mentioned work capability assessment figures in 2011 standing at 20% success rates. They now stand at 65%, acting as if this has come some kind of shock revelation and proof of lead swinging in society. Austerity has wrecked lives, wages are repressed, benefits frozen and not caught up, and on top of all that there was the pandemic, which he was Chancellor during the course of, got fined for partying as he did, not taking it seriously as he expected the entire country to, as we all feared for our lives and the lives of our loved ones who caught it, and others didn't either. Long COVID is very much a thing now, a brand new condition affecting some people where they never truly recover from having gotten the virus, taken it on the chin, as Boris Johnson put it, as a result of Tory stupidity. Society is on multiple fronts, a sicker one than when the Tories came to power. And where do unpaid carers fit into this picture as well? Because as usual, they've been completely ignored from the conversation. Will they literally have to give up caring or you'll take their benefits away? The money these people selflessly save the NHS each year is equivalent to a second NHS budget. You're a fool if you go after them. They'll have carers allowance, some of them, but not all, because that has very restrictive rules. They can work no more than 16 hours a week, so that would see them fall afoul of the less than half of full-time work ruling Sunak mentioned in his speech. That would be the adjudication for cutting off benefits after 1 year. If they work more, they lose their carer's allowance and are restricted from being able to care for their sick loved one, potentially. Address that one, please. Or is the sick person, regardless of their health or disability, ripe for picking on as well? What if we're talking about a person with a major disability here? You might give them a pass, but not their carer? You haven't thought this one through at all, have you? Fundamentally, Rishi Sunak's latest plan is to try and scare people back into being healthy. You can't do that. It doesn't work. This thing will be a mess of legal challenges, which will cost, as Rishi Sunak likes to call it, taxpayers' money. But he'll never regard covering his own backside in court, or trying and failing to, as we have so often seen in such cases where the DWP is involved, as wasting all of our money, because it belongs to all of us. It is public money. And what of Keir Starmer in this picture? What would Labour's response to this be? Well, with Rachel tougher than the Tories on benefits Reeves taking over Sunak's former role if Labour win the election, Sunak's words here will no doubt make her positively weak at the knees, I would imagine. She might need to sit down, possibly in the lavatory again. She does seem to like them. And Starmer has never shaken the nickname Sir Kid Starver for his decision to stick with the two-child benefit cap, which will keep families in poverty. Disproportionate cruelty to children. Labour will inevitably, I fancy, replicate this to some extent, and I say that because they've done so on everything else. And there's certainly nothing they've done recently to make me think otherwise, especially if you listen to what their shadow DWP Minister Liz Kendall has been saying. There's one more thing I want to bring up here, and that is the benefit claimant Sunak doesn't mention at all, and that are the benefits for the rich people like him. If we're talking about deserving versus undeserving, then we can't omit this lot, who again, Sunak makes no mention of. The Bank of England base rate increased since 2021 from 0.1% to 5.25%. Lots more interest has been charged on lots of different things, costing ordinary people far more since they pay it. Mortgages, rent, finance agreements, that kind of thing. Who's getting all this extra money? Those who own the means of lending and those providing a service upon which interest has gone up so much. So where Sunak wants to attack those provided with benefits by the Department for Work and Pensions, we should all be demanding he deals likewise with those getting benefits in effect from the Bank of England instead, especially since hitting their benefits won't impact their lives, whereas for the sick and disabled, it has been, as we've seen, and almost certainly will be again for many more, a matter of life and death. We'll keep an eye on this story. The Tories need to get elected to implement all of this, of course, which seems a massive stretch right now. So more focus really should be on what Labour would do. And having mentioned Liz Kendall a moment ago, here's what she said recently, which was a repulsive attack on the sick and disabled, as your video recommendation here, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.